We're going to talk some Cincinnati Bengals football here on the Our Lads Football Network, Our Lads Football YouTube channel. And whenever we talk about the Bengals, that means it's time to bring in John Sheeran from A to Z Sports, Cincinnati. How's it going, John?
I'm doing well, Greg. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I think we're both doing a little bit better than the Bengals have been, but hey, look, they're on a bye. So I couldn't think of a team that could use the bye at any better time of season, right, than the Bengals right now. This is their shot to kind of regroup, make some changes, and see if they can spit out a nice winning streak after the bye.
Yeah, right. I mean, it was a weird November because they only played 3 games with the bye coming last week after they played on Thursday night and then Sunday night, 2 very close losses, which has been kind of the theme for this team all season and giving up a lot of points in the process. But yeah, 6 games to go, including a very important one against Pittsburgh this Sunday.
Yeah, what we've been talking about on our shows have been about how, if you look at it, the Bengals, I mean, I know you have, but the Bengals, this way the schedule works out, that if they could just beat Pittsburgh to come out of the gates, following 3 games are very winnable. And then there's Denver, the team that they're chasing. So it's all in front of them, but they got to get past Pittsburgh first. So, based on what you've seen so far, and we're going to get into it because I got a lot more obviously in-depth questions. Just what your gut tell you about whether or not you think this particular team can possibly turn it around.
Yeah, the problems haven't really changed since like mid-season, right? Because Joe Burrow has been playing on fire really since the first couple of games when the offense and this team typically just starts out the gate slow. So offensively, like they can compete with anyone, and there are defenses that I think that can give them more fits than others. But if they were to make it to the postseason, I think that with the way that this offense is running, and even with they haven't been healthy along the offensive line, and T. Higgins has missed some games, like they can even stand to do a little bit better. And allowing Chase Brown to kind of settle in as that starter running back, it's really all comes down to the defense, and there's just been so much frustration on that side of the ball with guys who have either been here for a few years from those playoff teams who have just regressed massively. They're getting older, they're losing athleticism, and the vast majority of their free agent additions from this year just haven't panned out. And that leads you to kind of just throwing your hands up in the air saying, what can you do if you aren't going to make aggressive moves at the trade deadline outside of trading for Khalil Herbert, who has barely played at running back for them in 2 games? You're kind of stuck with who you have on defense. And it's just been a mess in the secondary at cornerback. They've had injuries there, and they're down to really like their 3rd pairing of starters at that position. They have no trust in their safeties. Von Bell has not been who they expected to be when they brought him back, and Geno Stone has been a disappointment. So they're a really poor pass defense because they don't have reliability in the secondary, and they don't have a pass rush that can win outside of Trey Hendrickson. And until those things magically change, it's really hard to be confident about this defense outside of just taking advantage of, like you said, some not so impressive teams in the coming weeks. But I wouldn't include Pittsburgh in there because obviously Russell Wilson is playing like the Seattle Seahawks version, right? So it's going to be a very tough game on Sunday to really start what needs to be, if not a 6-game winning streak, winning 5 of these last 6 games at minimum.
Yeah, I mean, you've already got a nice jump start on some of the questions, because the main thing that we all want to find out is what's wrong with the defense, because Anarumo's been there the whole time, and they've had good defenses, competitive defenses. I guess the one knock, even though it improved a little bit last year, is the pass rush, and we've talked about that a lot, and needing somebody else, other than Trey Hendrickson. So yeah, but the fall off is just dramatic because when we talked in the offseason, it was, they lost the key guys in the secondary, and really the defense, it was mostly they just miscommunication every week, and the pass defense was terrible. And so you kind of figured, all right, well, bring some guys back, like you said, draft, free agency, we'll fix that, and then everything will take care of itself. And then it didn't. So it's I don't believe Anarumo is going anywhere. So, and again, that's why I think the bye is so important, because I got to believe that, he's going to sit there for the next couple of weeks. He's probably not going home, and he's going to figure out how to get this defense somehow back to some sort of normalcy, so their offense can win games and not have to worry about scoring 45 points. So let's take it one by one then. Let's start with the pass rush. Is it worse than it was? Are they just not getting any support other than Hendrickson? Other than Hendrickson?
Yeah, I mean, what you see is what you get right now. Like, they are one of the worst teams in terms of pass rush win rate, and the only reason why they're as high as they are is because of Trey. Like, I think the MVP is rarely going to go to a defensive player, and especially on a losing team. But without Trey Hendrickson, this defense would be it would be easily the worst in the league. Like, he's the only one who's finishing his pressures and he's winning at a high rate, regardless of who he's going up against. And the drop off from him to the next best pass rusher is the size of the Grand Canyon. Like, Sam Hubbard is physically cooked. He's playing on a bad hamstring that he could have had season-ending surgery on back in August during training camp, but he decided to rest up and try to play through it. And it just hasn't looked like it's paid off, because he just looks like a shell of his former self. And they've tried to get a more of a rotation with Miles Murphy and Joseph Asai, but neither one of those guys, albeit they're winning more than Hubbard as a pass rusher, but they're not finishing at the quarterback, and they're not making the same plays like in years past of killing drives and giving the offense extra possessions, which is why the offense has had to basically play keep up and having to be absolutely perfect in a lot of these games where they're really close, but they can't finish the job because they can't make those plays when Hendrickson doesn't win like he does for 30% of the game. So Hubbard has been terrible. Miles Murphy has not taken the steps that they needed him to make. Joseph Asai has played more than Miles Murphy, but still hasn't really made the jump that you would have liked him to make. And then inside, it's like BJ Hill, I think, is still a solid player, but if he's your best interior pass rusher, it's not enough. And they wanted Sheldon Rankins to be that, and they've tried to just make him, the 3 technique that can penetrate and do work, but he just hasn't won enough like he did against the Bengals last year when he was with the Houston Texans or when he was with the New York Jets. It looks like his fall off has probably arrived. And I think they're asking him to do a little bit of different things, maybe like holding, like 2-gapping, or just trying to open up opportunities for other guys. And it just hasn't really been a fit. So they don't have that answer inside to complement Hendrickson on the outside. And they're just not seeing the development kind of show with both Murphy and Osai, and having those guys turn their pressures into production. So it really just falls on Hendrickson, and that's what makes you think about any rumor. Like, there's just not a lot that he can do schematically with his secondary if you're not gaining anything from a pass rush. It just makes everything else on the defense operationally worse.
And the rookie class up front, those 3 kids, including the 2 guys in the middle, they just haven't. I mean, is there any hope at all that second half of the season they're going to get a little bit better, and any hope that they could pick up a little bit of the slack?
I mean, the problem with that is, like, Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson were never great pass rushers in college, right? That wasn't what Chris Jenkins was known for at Michigan, and McKinley Jackson is this nose tackle who kind of plays like a 3 technique, but he still doesn't have like the explosion that you need to consistently win in that regard. So they're not really asked to kind of do that. Like, I think they're just kind of, getting their feet wet as run defenders and on base downs. And I think they've made some progress there. So I think those 2 are fine rotational pieces for the next few years, particularly in run defense. But yeah, in terms of just answers as a pass rushers, like they're just not what they need necessarily. And Cedric Johnson, who's the other rookie, like, he's just buried in the depth chart. So he hasn't really been gaining a lot of opportunities. Maybe that could be a potential answer, just to see what he can do rather than just throw Sam Hubbard out there for as much as they've done. But no, they don't have a lot of answers right now from this rookie class in terms of the pass rush.
Were they attempting, from what you heard as far as the deadline, to try to make an upgrade, or is this just not the way this team goes about doing? Which normally we understand that's not, the Bengals' way to give up future for, especially when they try to develop. But was there any hope as a fan base that they were going to add anybody?
That's the worst part, Greg. There was hope because there were reports about them kind of gauging the defensive tackle trade market. Azeez Ojulari from the Giants was a name that was brought up, but I think the Giants wanted a little bit more than what the Bengals were willing to give up. But either him, Jadeveon Clowney, Calais Campbell, like there are options out there that ended up not getting traded. And you're thinking to yourself, like the Bengals haven't really been successful with a lot of these day 3 picks in recent years, which is one of the main things of why they were successful in the mid 2010s with their drafting and developing and whatnot. So that their own willingness, I should say, to part ways with these day 3 picks just for guys that could be instant answers. Like you're holding on to maybes of the future where you need answers, you need help at these spots, and there are guys that could have given them that help, and I think they just were unwilling to part ways with anything more than just the 7th round pick that they gave up for Khalil Herbert, who again hasn't really played in the 2 games he's been here.
Yeah, we'll talk offense in a little bit. So Murphy and Osai, because we've talked a lot about Osai, so it's just now Murphy's got a little bit more time, but at this point, as far as Osai, that's it. I mean, he's just not going to be the guy that they had hoped. I know there was a lot of injuries, but he's probably not even going to be here next year. Is that pretty much where we're going?
It's probably the case. Like, again, I don't think he's a bad player necessarily, but they considering where Hubbard is right now, considering where Murphy is, I think they need Osai to be more. And they just need they need those good reps to be great, and they need him to actually just finish the play, and that's just not happening. He's playing more than Miles Murphy, I think, because they feel like he's ahead of Murphy in that regard, but still, man, it's just it's relative, right? If Joseph Osai is your second best edge rusher, like it says something about the progress that he's made, but it says some also about you just don't have enough there, and that's just kind of how it's been.
Well, I mean, that's what they decided to do in the draft, because there you go. You got a 2nd and a 3rd round draft pick, both interior guys, no edge rusher until round 6. So is that because, and again, I don't remember exactly specifically what we talked about. You don't have to remember because but was it more of, well, yeah, we got Murphy, we got Osai, they're going to develop, they're going to get better, and that's our solution this season.
Yeah, it was that combined with the fact that they never really replaced DJ Reader in free agency. Like they didn't sign a defensive tackle, so they needed bodies there. And again, like I had no qualms with Chris Jenkins in the 2nd round. I think McKinley Jackson was a bit of a reach in the 3rd round, but I don't think he's someone that is like a liability out there necessarily. I think he's made some strides. So good players, but like you said, they just don't have enough horses up front for sure.
All right, so linebacker, and I know this doesn't have anything to do with the pass rush, but still, I mean, is it just have any of these guys taken a step back?
Kind of, I would say. Like, I think Jermaine Pratt has, like, he's always been the guy that you would rely on to make like some type of a turnover, a big play. It's happened like once this season. I wouldn't consider him like a problem on this defense. I think, again, linebacker is so dependent on what happens in front and behind you. And I think the fact that they just had so much more higher expectations for both of those groups around the linebacking group, where they thought that, everything would kind of flow together and both Pratt and Wilson would kind of pick up where they left off in like 2022. And that just hasn't really been the case. I think with Wilson, he's been dealing with some injuries. He's on the injury report this week with a knee. Hasn't been exactly the best season for him. And again, like I wouldn't say that he's been a bad player for them. Neither has Pratt, but in terms of being difference makers like they've been in years past, hasn't really been the case. And I think that's just a symptom of the entire defense as a whole.
And then the secondary. All right, so Bell's back. They bring in Stone. Let's start there at safety, because Battle is also in his 2nd year. So what happened? Was this just is it a, because I know how important it is, and you talked about a lot of the mistakes last year and the communication and all that stuff. Are they still having those problems? Is it a matter of these guys just getting together and trying to figure out a cohesive way to work together, and it's just not working out with this group?
Yeah, like there were communication issues all the way up to like a week ago against the Chargers. It led to, a couple touchdowns that Justin Herbert threw. Part of that was the cornerbacks too, but with Von Bell, like early on in the season, it was very clear and apparent that this was not the same Von Bell that was with the Bengals a couple years ago. A couple years older, lost a step. not as good in open space and tackling. And that led to Anarumo doing something that he doesn't like to do, which is rotate guys in and out of the secondary. That's why Jordan Battle has practically played, not I want to say half, but probably like 40% of the defensive snaps ever since like, late September, early October. So I don't think that's necessarily helped in terms of the cohesiveness like you were talking about. And also, Geno Stone, like they brought him from Baltimore, who used him as the third safety along with Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams, and he fit that role really well in Mike McDonald's defense. And now they're asking Stone to kind of play more of like the true free safety position like they had Jesse Bates do for years. And I think obviously you're not going to replace Jesse Bates necessarily, but I think the hope was that he could fulfill a similar type of a role and just manage, deep zones and keep everything in front of him. And it's been different compared to the role that he played in Baltimore. And I think that's led to him not being what they expected him to be. And that has led to even more, issues in front of him. And there's more distrust and there's more miscommunication issues going on. So both Von Bell's regressing and Geno Stone not being that true one-to-one replacement, I think has definitely messed up a lot of things for their plan. And they've just been scrambling ever since.
And how's the corner situation? Because they went out and they did draft Newton. Unfortunately, it's not like they went after a high draft pick, even though Newton's a talented kid, but he's a rookie. And he is a 5th-round rookie. And then, of course, we don't see him in there because he's a little bit banged up right now. But talk about the corner room. Is it who's been disappointing the most?
It's Kane Taylor-Britt by far. He's been benched twice this year.
Wow.
Most recently last week against the Chargers. The first one came against the Panthers, believe it or not, against Andy Dalton. He doesn't look anything remotely like himself from the first 2 years. Like the movement ability is there, but he's biting on double moves. There seems to be like a lack of confidence in what he's seen in front of him. And it's just been a mess, both in man and zone. And both Dax Hill and DJ Turner were playing good football this year. Like they were battling to be like one of, yeah, right. They're both battling to be the starter for the season. And Dax Hill won that battle, and he was playing the best football he's played in the NFL. And then he goes down with a torn ACL in week 5. So DJ Turner takes his place, and I think Turner really found his footing, as he settled into that position. And now he's on injured reserve, and we don't know if he's going to be for sure out for the year. I think it's a broken clavicle that he suffered against the Chargers. But their 2 best cornerbacks are not available to them right now, and their supposed number 1 cornerback, Taylor-Britt, he's just as erratic as possible. So they're really counting on Josh Newton, who I think they envisioned to be a slot cornerback for the future, to be the Mike Hilton replacement. He's now playing on the boundary, and the reason why he lasted to the 5th round, like you mentioned, he's not a fast guy. He's kind of small, doesn't have a lot of length, and he was a 4 or 5 guy at best. So I think there are receivers that can definitely take advantage of that. But he approaches the game the right way. He's a great practice player. He's got a great mentality, and he does have a lot of ball production to him. But if he's like your only hope for stability at the position, you're not in a good spot. Like they needed Taylor-Britt to not fall apart like he's doing this season, and that's exactly what's happened.
So, if you're Lou, do you think that that's at least where he's got to figure out? Well, how is there any way for me to get Taylor-Britt's confidence going by doing? And I'm not asking you, of course, to figure this out. I guess I'm just speaking out loud. Because it seems to me that that's how you got to, again, because there's no other way around it. Like you said, you can't bring anyone else in here. So maybe there's a way to get Britt going again, and maybe there's a way to get Stone back to playing the type of position that he excelled at instead of putting him in the position that they put him in. So at least there are a couple of things in the secondary that I guess they could try to do. And of course, they got to get Turner healthy. What's the status there?
Yeah, so like I said, Turner, he's on IR. He's not confirmed to be out for this season, so there's a chance that if they win these next 3 to 4 games, like he can come back and he can make a difference. As far as Taylor-Britt, right. But as far as Taylor-Britt, it's gotten to the point where fans are wondering if he should switch to safety, which he was a safety at Nebraska, I think, early on in his college career. Then he moved to cornerback, and I again, like, Bengals fans had this conversation about Leon Hall a long time ago when Leon Hall was at the end of his career. Obviously, a phenomenal slot cornerback, but you get older and your movement ability isn't quite there. You're not able to mirror guys as well. But obviously, the intellect is there. Like the mind, the mental is
Sure.
still there. So you can put him in a position where his athleticism, his lack of athleticism, rather, is not as exposed. And again, I don't think that's the problem with Taylor Britt. I think he's obviously still 24, 25 years old. Like he still has the speed and the explosion to stay in man coverage. Like he just doesn't trust what he sees. So I don't really know how moving him to safety is going to make all those problems go
Yeah.
away. And, then you would bench obviously one of Stone or Von Bell for that regard. So I think they've just been trying to push him by just, telling him that, hey, like your job is not safe at all. Like you've been benched twice now. And I think he's handled that pretty well, all things considered. But now he's back on the field out of necessity because both Turner and Hill are out. So it just comes down to him just recognizing that, hey, like I just need to lock in, and my opportunities are slipping. I'm not for sure to be a starter next year, but these are 6 games where they don't have a choice but to play me. And I just have to just revert back to what I was doing as a rookie and a second year player, because that ability is still there. And I don't think it's going to be maximized if they move him to safety out of nowhere. And also, Greg, how funny would it be if they draft Dax Hill as a cornerback, but move him to safety, and then draft Cam Taylor Britt and have both of them swap positions after year 3? It's basically like it sums up how the Bengals personnel department has been completely out of step with the coaching staff in recent years. And it's led to a lot of the problems that they have.
And they're okay. The relationship is still good as far as with Lou. He's there's nothing wrong there. It's personnel. He's not going to be made of a scapegoat.
He could be, to be honest with you, man. Like,
Okay.
because I would say it's more likely that they fire him than Zach Taylor. And again, like I think that might not be the most popular thing from like an NFL wide perspective, but as bad as the defense is this year, it wasn't supposed to be this bad. Like there's still an accountability that like you're just not maximizing personnel, and obviously injuries haven't helped. And he's still been a major part of a lot of the decisions that they did make, about a lot about the guys that they did bring in. And if the vision just completely goes kaput, then you have to have some accountability.
Sure.
There. Like at the end of the day, the defense is the biggest reason as to why this team is 4-7.
Yep.
Like Joe Burrow is doing everything that he can. Jamar Chase is having a career year, and at least Trey Hendrickson is doing well. But like if it's this bad, like you can't go into 2025 just running it back with everyone. Like you have to make some changes, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because now I just remember what took place in that Kansas City game, and if we would have talked, I would have sure liked to have asked you about this, because I remember myself just wondering why on earth in that situation were they playing the rookie, and I was like, I don't remember seeing this guy, and then I looked up the stats and I go, wait a second, this guy's got like 7 plays to his name in the NFL, and you stuck him out there at the biggest play of the game to try to wrap up the game. And I don't blame the kid. I blame the coaching staff. Like, why was he out there? And then you get the quote from Anarumo about, I don't know, he's been playing well and he deserved to be out there. I mean, that was basically what he said. And it's like, well, that doesn't sound very good. So that must have been really a starting point almost to what was going to take place the rest of the season with the defense. I mean, that must have just been, the fans must have just went nuts with that situation.
I think it's a multi-layered thing, because Dijon Anthony is the rookie from Ole Miss.
Yeah.
And again, like a phenomenal story, guy who played at like 3 different colleges and worked his way to being where he is and for it to be a draft pick. I was of the opinion that like I agreed with Anarumo in the sense that he had a phenomenal training camp in the preseason. And I do think that like if you are earning the role that you're getting, like then you deserve to be out on the field. But at the same time, I understand that like in that moment, you would have liked a better, more experienced player than just rookie Dijon Anthony being out there. And I think that's a combination of like it. Yes, like I obviously if a guy earns a role, he earns a role. But at the same time, the Bengals themselves, I don't think they value just the like bringing in quality backups and quality depth as well as like other teams do. And I think part of that is because they don't shell out money to those caliber of players, so like they end up relying
the $1 million guys. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, like and that forces them to rely on rookies who don't have the experience that you would like in those situations. So it's the coaching staff making the best of what they have in terms of like the personnel that they've received. Excuse me. So it's a multi-layered thing. Like obviously Anthony, like he was the best option. Maybe he was the best option in that scenario, but you would have liked, before the season starts, to have more flexibility in that regard.
Yeah, I remember like even counting like the players that were active in the game and wondering, well, why wasn't like another guy, like most of these other guys I thought were on the roster were obviously ahead of him in the depth chart. I just didn't understand what he was doing out there. I don't know. Maybe someone was hurt. I'm not followed the team, but anyway, that was a long time ago. I just thought of it and I guess I just realized that, yeah, I mean, the kind of season it's been, that certainly was maybe a tip off of what was to come. And then offensively, so how is the offensive line done this year? Because while it still looks, you still see Joe Burrow running for his life at times. The offense has just been exploding, as we all know, with points. So the offensive line has to be doing something right. So is the offensive line been okay?
It's hard to wrap up the offensive line as a whole, because Orlando Brown Jr. is having the best season in at least a few years. Like I think it's been a career year for him personally, but this is a guy that never missed any games, and he's missed the last 3 with a knee fibula injury. So his replacement, Cody Ford, right. Cody Ford is his replacement, and he's been terrible. So like they haven't had good left tackle play in recent weeks. I'm just gonna say it. They have the worst starting guard duo in the league. Like Cordell Volson and Alex Kappa are complete liabilities at this point in pass protection. I think Volson provides value as a run blocker, but Kappa, I think he's 29. He's almost 2 years removed from a knee injury, and his play has dropped off ever since. I don't think he's a quality starter anymore, and Volson has never really been a quality starter in my opinion. So they absolutely need at least one new starting guard, preferably 2. Marius Mims, I think, has been okay as a rookie. Like he hasn't been Joe Alt necessarily, but much better than, past rookie offensive linemen that the Bengals have brought out there. And I think, there's still ways for him to go, but I think he's shown a good base level of talent. And I think Ted Karras, solid in pass protection, but again, he's on the other side of 30. The movement ability is not there. You need more athleticism inside, and I think that's the most important thing for a Joe Burrow offensive line. But like you said, like Joe Burrow still plays well because he's, in my opinion, a masochist. I think he likes just all the chaos around him. It's almost where he thrives necessarily. It's been that way really since LSU, when his offensive line, that line won like the best offensive line in the country, but there were still plenty of times where he was just making things out of nothing. And it just seems like he just gets into the flow of the game when he senses pressure. And that's when a lot of his highlight plays happen. So it's not the worst thing in the world for him to see pressure, but you would still like a more athletic interior offensive line. You would like better guard play. And obviously you don't want to have a third string left tackle out there against the Ravens and the Chargers and such.
By the way, the decision on the 2-point conversion against Baltimore, I always think, and I've been doing this for so long that I probably should realize that this isn't how it works. But I used to think that you always have these like 2-point conversion attempts that you keep in your back pocket each week, and this is the one we're going to use. And, we're 90% sure that if we need this is the one that's going to do it. Or even that you have 1 or 2 for the year, that you're just going to show everybody that this is the best designed 2-point conversion I've ever made. And you go out there in a big spot, and it's like, now look, I completely understand that I forget who it was that was getting booked. I get it. That should have been a penalty, 100%. But your second option is your third string tight end. I mean, your second string tight. I mean, that makes no sense to me. It's like you go this way, guys being mugged. You go this way, and I got to throw the ball to Tanner Hudson. But I can understand why the fans just must have just flipped out with all the penalties that weren't being called at that time. But that was a little bit confusing. Again, I don't know. Again, I'm not a Bengal fan, but I don't know how they felt about that.
The only justification behind it was that Tanner Hudson, who was third string tight end, he was having a good game that game. And I think they just felt like he was kind of in the flow of it. And obviously there was going to be a tension on Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. He had a one-on-one opportunity. The ball came out not well because, like you said,
high. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So there's pressure in his face. But yeah, you would like to say if you're going to fail, you might as well fail, going to your best guys. But that's the only justification that I could think of with Tanner Hudson having a decent game relative to Tanner Hudson, standards.
And overall, as far as the skill position players, because that's what's been helping them light up the scoreboard. Of course, having T. Higgins out there once every month is always helpful. And Chase Brown, I have him on one of my year-to-year fantasy team. So I was actually, and it wasn't just because of that, but when Moss got hurt, I felt that was the best thing for the Bengals. I was like, good, get Chase Brown in there. It's enough of baby in him. It's time for him to play. And I just think they're a better offense with him in there. Now, you mentioned Herbert. By the way, I also have Herbert in my dynasty league. He's been sitting there for the past couple of years. I get the news that he gets traded to the Bengals. And I'm like, yes, awesome. Finally. Now Herbert's going to get some touches, and he's going to show everybody just how good he is. And first carry, he fumbles the ball. And ever since then, I don't think we've seen him more than a couple of times. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going on there, why he's not getting any playing time. But overall, the skill position players have actually done their job.
Let's start with the receivers. This is it. They don't have a quality third option. And like that was always going to be a risk when you move on from Tyler Boyd, even if in my opinion, it was the right time to move on from him. But Andre Yosivas, he's really only useful in the red zone and on these broken plays. Like he's just not a reliable option to move the chains. And that is like the biggest drop off, I think, from, the peak of Tyler Boyd. They've tried to make him the slot receiver. I don't think it's really where he's natural at. I think he's just got so many ways to go. I just don't think he should be a starter, but they don't really have any other options because the next guy up is Jermaine Burton, who is completely unreliable for a lot of obvious reasons. And I think he's kind of taking it upon himself to be, more locked in, for lack of a better word. But there are still things where you notice that he's just not really on the same page with Burrow, and he just doesn't look like the same guy from Alabama. And then combine that with T. Higgins missing half the season. I have really, when you say all this out loud, it makes you crazy how Burrow is one of the leading leaders in passing, and Jamar Chase is lighting the league on fire without anyone consistently on the other side of him taking attention away from the defense. It's just been a testament to how Burrow and Chase have been connecting this year like it's 2019 at LSU. And I think it's one of the biggest disappointments on this team. There was so much optimism with both Yoshi and Burden to take over those snaps and reps from Tyler Boyd and to potentially step up with T. Higgins missing some games. I think Mike Gesicki deserves a lot of credit too. He's been by far their best free agent addition this year, and he's practically been like the third wide receiver out there. Like he's just a big slot at the end of the day. That's who he's always been. He's never really been that much of a tight end, but they needed so much more out of Yoshi and Burden this year, and they just haven't really gotten it. So they're extremely fortunate that Jamar Chase is having the best year of his life.
And Charlie Jones hasn't developed yet either. Now, Burton, I'm willing to give him, again, outside observer, he's a rookie. Mm-hmm. And all rookies develop, especially at wide receiver, all differently. So no reason to think that Burton's not the same way. And next year, when he's really in the spotlight, boom, he's going to be the guy that everybody expects. I still believe that's the case. I should have him on my dynasty team, just like I have Jamar Chase. But as far as everybody else, yeah, I mean, again, Jones, I guess, hasn't developed. And why do you think Herbert's not playing?
So with Jones, he's been out, I think, for a few weeks with a groin injury. And yeah, like he had a promising training camp. And for whatever reason, like his opportunities just weren't there. He was always behind Trenton Irwin, who I didn't even mention him because at this point he's just a non-factor. He doesn't get open against single coverage. I don't really know why he's on the field whenever he is on the field. There's just a trust that Burrow has with him, but it doesn't really do them a lot of good. So it would be nice to see Charlie Jones get some more snaps on offense, but him not being healthy has not helped that. And with Herbert, yeah, like I think he just hit the nail on the head. Like he had his first touch and he fumbled, and it's just like, I mean, it was only his second day with the team, so it was unlikely he was going to play a lot that game anyways, because he was traded on Tuesday and he played on Thursday. But fumbling your first chance is not a great first impression. But you're right, man. Like Chase Brown was a bell cow at Illinois in his last year. Like he had 300 something touches. So it doesn't surprise me that he's taking on 20 plus touches a game with ease. But you would like to see that workload be decreased a little bit, and I think Herbert is the type of guy that they can do that with. But I think it would definitely help if Herbert was more adept in pass protection. That was Zach Moss's biggest value, along with just being an outlet receiver out of the backfield.
Yeah.
They don't really have that reliable pass protector out of the backfield now. Like, it's just Drew Sample at this point, who's basically a glorified, H back, so he can provide some value in pass protection. But Herbert's not really that guy, and I think out of the bye week he will get more carries. Maybe it might not be anything more than like 5 or 6, but anything to make sure that Chase Brown is not being overworked, because the last thing they want to do is to run him into the ground, and then you have no running game if he's out.
Yeah, because he's got that frame too. He can't withstand the rigors of the NFL without having some additional help. So, you would think, like you said, perfectly said, it's the bye week. It's time. No more 95% Chase Brown. They got to get Herbert some touches and relieve some of that pressure from him. All right. So what's your it sounds like you're pretty, even though they're going through a bye and even though the schedule's looking pretty good, it's sounding like you're just not really feeling it. Or you tell me. I mean, do you think that this team has what it takes, that if they can figure out a way to cut down their points allowed a few, that they might be able to make a playoff run and more? Or do you think this is a completely different team, and even if they somehow make the playoffs, they're just not equipped to make a run?
Well, they haven't beat a single winning team this season. They have the lowest strength of victory out of any team in the NFL, even below the Carolina Panthers. They've been close. Like,
They've been close.
They lost to the Chiefs by 1. They lost to the Ravens by, I think, a combined 2 or 3 points or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, they've been in these games. And when you have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, you're always going to be in these games. I just have very little confidence that they can not only make the playoffs, but do something in the playoffs unless this defense does a 180. Like, the pass rush just needs to finish. You need Miles Murphy to come alive to give Sam Hubbard some more help. You need Sheldon Rankins to look like the guy that you thought was going to be here when he signed. Unless this defense actually develops a decent pass rush outside of Trey Hendrickson, it's just going to be really hard to do much of anything, to beat anyone worth beating. Like, I have them at 7-10, going 3-3 these last 6 games, with wins over like the Cowboys and the Titans, because you should be able to beat those teams with the current state of those clubs. But until I see them, actually finish out against a quality team and they have an opportunity on Sunday, I just have very little confidence that they can do what needs to be done to make the playoffs. And it's a shame, because the AFC is wide open. And if your main competition right now is the Denver Broncos, like, you would feel pretty decent about that, despite how well Bo Nix is playing, despite how good that defense is. But it's been a really frustrating year for them, because a lot of things that they planned on working just haven't worked out, and they're just left with a lot of questions this offseason that they have to answer.
Well, we have seen teams before. It happens a lot. They make these second half runs, and I guess before they make these runs, they're not in good position for reasons. And so, look, I don't know. Maybe some of those teams are getting their players healthy again, and that's not going to happen with the Bengals. But I don't know. I mean, the talent's there. We'll see. Like you said, I think even if they beat Pittsburgh, as long as they don't beat them 44-40, then maybe the hope will be there right off the bat, and it'll show everyone that this team can make the run. So we'll see. And then I know we'll talk when the season's over, obviously free agency and the draft, and maybe whether they retain their DC. But is there a definite, if you had to just give me one position that they're going to look at for the draft or free agency, is it glaring? Is it like that's definitely a position, or are there 1 or 2 things that they're going to have to look at?
They need to basically overhaul the defensive end spot, really the entire defensive line, if we're being honest, because Joseph Ossai, Cam Sample, BJ Hill, all going to be free agents. I don't expect, maybe one of them will be back, right? Sam Hubbard's probably a cap casualty. Trey Hendrickson is going to be in the last year of his contract, and he wants a new deal, and I don't think he's going to get it because he's going to be 30 years old. So you could be looking at almost an entirely new defensive line for this team. Okay. And I have confidence in saying that because they've never been shy at least spending some money there and going after free agents. It's just going to be a full-fledged attack for both the draft and free agency, and definitely guard as well. Like it's the last position on the offensive line that they absolutely need to address, and really just overhauling the trenches, because it's been their Achilles heel for the past decade, and they just need to get it right in order to keep somewhat of this window alive.
And then lastly, probably should have asked you this before. I'm sure this is a big talking discussion. Everybody's probably talking about this, but do you think Zach Taylor will be back if they don't make the playoffs?
I do. I think unless they lose out and like there's complete chaos in the locker room, right? I think they'll give him one more year. I think his seat will be scorching hot next year because I don't know the tolerance level of wasting perfectly good Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase seasons. But I think with the fact that the offense has been the one good part of this team, and unless people completely give up on him, which is trending that direction, I'm not trying to say it's all rainbows and sunshine over here. Like the disconnect between what he's saying and what Burrow and Chase are saying after these games, it's very clear. So it's trending in that direction. But unless it gets significantly worse, I think Taylor will be back in 2025. Beyond that, I don't know.
And then, like you said, defensive coordinator probably gets upgraded, or if you want to call it that, but replaced. And then a lot of personnel moves, especially on that line of scrimmage. So, all right, well, we'll see. First of all, there's still games to be played. So with Joe Burrow there and an exciting football team that the Bengals are, I think I speak for a lot of football fans. We certainly hope that they can get back into this because it's a lot better when they're involved. So things are not going well, but the Bengals fan base, you guys are lucky. Whether you know it, I think you know it. When you have a special player like Joe Burrow, like you said, you have to take advantage of it while you have them. I'm going to have links in the description for how you can check out all of John's work, his content, videos, all that stuff. So if you are a Bengals fan and you're new to checking John out, well, those links in the description area will locate you exactly where you got to go. And John, I look forward to hey, look, if they do get back into the postseason discussion and there are actual big games to talk about towards the end of the season, maybe we'll do this again before the offseason.
I would like that, Greg.
I would like that too. Thanks, John.
See ya.